this edition of Sightings, at the historic Black Swan Inn, memories of the past stubbornly refuse to die.
Every step I took, there was another step behind me.
Now a Sightings investigation turns up evidence of an unsolved murder and buried treasure.
Is there some kind of a treasure here?
There's supposed to be.
20 years ago, they saw a mysterious object in the sky. Now a couple relives the disturbing encounter only to recover lost memories.
It never occurred to me that there could possibly be some missing time involved.
Scientists examine the growing belief that plants can communicate.
Plants, once they hear the sounds of another plant, they start to what appears to be a dialogue between each other.
And the latest dramatic video footage from the world's newest UFO hotspot.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. For more than 5,000 years, Salado Creek in what is now Texas was a place where Native Americans came to trade, to fall in love, to fight, and to die. In 1867, prosperous German immigrants bought the land and they built a mansion. And since then, the house has been fraught with tragedy, suicide, perhaps even murder. Well, not surprisingly, Sightings discovered the mansion because the current owners fear the spirits are restless. It was built for an immigrant family who came to San Antonio with nothing and built fortune. Then it was home for the highest of Texas high society. Now it's the Black Swan Inn, an elegant and historic retreat. But this house and the very land it stands on have a darker side that began long ago when the creek ran with the blood of Mexicans and Americans fighting to claim it as their own. Behind this charming facade, there is a legacy of suffering, suicide, even murder. The solemn secrets that Joanne Rivera and her family did not know until the past began to invade the present.
I wasn't aware that there were spirits when I first came to the property, but shortly thereafter, I was very much aware of everything that was going on here. From voices to doors opening and closing and footsteps.
It was supposed to be the Rivera's dream house, but they had only been here a week when the haunting activity intensified.
The dolls would all be rearranged, and it was as if there were children that had been in there playing. The lights would turn off and on. It sometimes sounds like the piano, like this piano is playing all by itself. The spirits or the energies that are here were kind of testy. They wanted to see what I was going to do.
Joanne tried to put the spirits, the ghostly music, and the haunting activity behind her. But then, her daughter Meredith had a frightening experience of her own in the south wing of the house.
The one time I went down there by myself, the only time, every step I took, there was another step behind me. I came running back to my mom because I was real uncomfortable. The south wing harbors a lot of animosity and a lot of anger. I feel a lot of anger and a lot of negative violence. There was a time when I first came here that I was working in one of the closets in the south wing, and I got the feeling that I was being watched from the attic. I felt very threatened that I needed to get out and get out now. And I ran up the hallway and was like, oh, God, I can't believe that just happened to me.
According to Joanne, it was not long after she and her daughter had felt the menacing but invisible presence that the threatening energy appeared to Joanne in human form. It came unexpectedly in the middle of the night.
All of a sudden, the bedroom lights came on, and there was a man standing at the foot of my bed with his hands on his hips. At first, I thought, well, it was a dream. You know, you were just imagining things. But then this went on every night for a good week. At about the same time, this man would come to the room. And then finally, I decided to rearrange the furniture. And after I moved the furniture, then he no longer came into the room.
Rearranging the furniture may have kept him out of Joanne's room, but it didn't mean that he was gone. During a storm, he came again, this time to Meredith's room.
I was laying in bed, and it was lightning, so there was lots of shadows, but a couple of times I looked, and I saw an old, wrinkly-faced man. And not only, I mean, he was looking in the window at me. And the first time I saw it, I was scared, but I wasn't sure if it was really there or not. But I looked again, and 3 times, and he was there each time, just looking. I was so frightened because his face was there clearly. And there was no balcony, there's no steps, there's no tree, there's no way he could hold himself there to look. So finally, she moved out of the room. And actually, until today, no one has ever slept in that room again. I never believed in ghosts, and then when I moved in here and had, I guess, the opportunity to experience, and I did, I changed my mind about it because I saw it for myself and I believed it.
Meredith and Joanne are not the only ones who have felt the eerie presences within. Joanne's husband did not wish to appear on camera, but just at the end of the driveway, Justin Stutz and his mother Elizabeth run a vintage clothing business out of the Black Swan's original carriage house, and they believe that there are many ghosts here too.
Sometimes you'll walk into a building and you automatically just shudder. You feel that there's someone else there. You look around, you're convinced there's someone else in the room with you, and there's no one there.
Unlike the main house, the ghosts here are not menacing or threatening.
There's what I call our little girl, who throws little temper tantrums and throws things around, knocks all my photos over, and it's a childish temper tantrum.
The little girl may be their most recent sighting, but for more than 30 years, Elizabeth and Justin have watched another apparition roam the grounds.
There is a lady who haunts the front porch of the main house and also the front yard. I've seen her off and on for many years. She's a tall, rather tall, I would say, beautiful, has long dark hair, wears a long white dress like a lady would from, say, the 1920s.
The gazebo is at the foot of the hill. And we have a young woman who likes that area. It's very comforting. It's very romantic, so maybe she's just drawn to that area.
The spirit had no name, but Joanne was haunted by the feeling that the ghost was a real person trapped in time. Then Joanne was contacted by Dosia Williams, a local historian who was writing a book about San Antonio's historic mansions. Dosia told Joanne all she knew about the home's history and its previous owners, including Park Street, a renowned attorney who was the real-life model for Perry Mason. Street lived here in the 40s and 50s with his beautiful wife, Jolene.
Jolene Wood Street died very, very young of cancer. She was in her 30s. She did have one youngster at the time of her death. But she was a very beautiful woman, had always been very, very lovely. And I understand she is probably one of the entities or spirits that still closely watches over the house, because she was very possessive of it when she lived here and very protective of it and loved it very much.
The woman who I have seen on the front lawn, and the one in the white dress, I believe she is Park Street's wife. It looks like the pictures I have seen of her.
They were rich, famous, deeply in love. And when Jolene died, Park followed soon after in what was reported as a suicide.
I take for granted the story that was in the Express News and on the police blotters, that from a 4-poster bed with a teaster, he is supposed to have hung himself. Of course, it's also said that perhaps he didn't hang himself, that he was murdered, but I have no concept of how that might have happened.
But murder was the first thing psychic Kathleen Bittner-Roth sensed when Joanne invited her to survey the house.
The moment I stepped through the door, there was a psychic vision of a man hanging.
She grabbed her throat and turned around and said someone was hung here.
My sense in seeing this man was this was not a suicide, that someone murdered this man, that he was removed from here to make it look like a suicide.
On instinct, Kathleen went directly to the south wing and stopped at this closet door, the same place where Joanne had felt threatening energy many times before.
I don't want to go in this closet either. I mean, look, you guys. I have a sense that there were 2 men that were involved with whatever was in that closet. There was something in that closet that they were after. I believe a huge safe
And Kathleen sensed a connection to Park Street and his murder.
That closet where that room is, I believe, was his office or a study area. It was either where he kept something valuable or it's where someone watched him, meaning to do him harm. And that energy, that spirit is still there in that closet.
But who or what is that energy? And what was in that closet that someone was willing to kill for? Joanne asked Sightings for help, and we enlisted the psychic mind of Peter James.
I'm hoping that he can give us more information as to who's here and why they're here. But I also believe that part of the reason that I'm here and that the energies and the spirits that are putting up with me is that I'm here to resolve some of their issues. And maybe that's Park's death.
When Sightings returns, psychic Peter James investigates the Black Swan.
There was a blow to the head or something to the head is what I'm feeling.
The ghosts who are said to haunt the Black Swan Inn read like a who's who of San Antonio society. Among them, the spirit of a ravishing debutante cut down in her prime, and a local attorney whose life inspired Earl Stanley Gardner to create Perry Mason, and whose death was ruled a suicide but may have been murder. Does his spirit want to win just one more case? And what do the other restless energies want? Psychic Peter James has come to find out. A beautiful spirit runs through the grounds. A menacing specter peers in the window. A restless energy penetrates every room. Are they the players in a 30-year-old mystery yet to be solved? Peter James will try to find out by using what he calls his seventh sense, his psychic power.
It seems like the wood in the house rings the bell with a name. I don't know what that means yet. When I first walked into the house, I mentioned sensing some beautiful woodwork within the house, but it rings a bell with a name, the wood. I feel like there's someone whose name began with a J or a G. I think it's a J. I get a sense of something political. This is, of course, preliminary.
The Wood daughter, Jolene, she was given the name of her mother's maiden name. She was an only child, met and married a very prominent local young attorney here in San Antonio, Hall Park Street. And a political figure, he ran for numerous political offices.
Peter was sensing this chapter in the home's notorious history. He was told nothing about this place, and yet he was describing Park Street to a T.
Now, bear in mind, when I mentioned political, that I think would tie in with something legal, like someone that also practiced some kind of law as well.
He was a very dynamic man, a very powerful, sometimes a very controversial figure.
This person died very, very tragically. I think it was, his life was taken at the hand of another, I think.
When he made these revelations, Peter did not know that another psychic, called in by the family, had already surveyed the house and had reached the exact same conclusion.
My sense was this was not a suicide, that someone murdered this man, that he was removed from here to make it look like a suicide.
In the many years that I've investigated hauntings, there's no doubt in my mind that the nature of the circumstances as to how Parks died was in fact murder, and I would wager all of my psychic ability on that fact. There was a blow to the head or something to the head. There was an injury to the head is what I'm feeling.
And it was in the south wing that Peter felt the answer would be found. In a cold, dark room, Peter claimed to see the face of a man staring at him.
It looked like I saw the face of a man looking in a window, an older man. That window back there, as a matter of fact, right there, right, that window there. The south wing, in my opinion, is scale of 1 to 10 is probably a 12 as far as activity, and particularly that little bar area or the area that I wasn't able to get into.
Peter not only visualized the strange energies, he also began to hear a haunting melody.
Feels like I hear someone playing the piano. I don't know if that ever happens here in the absence of physical beings, if the piano starts playing.
Joanne and the owner before her both believe that they have heard the piano play by itself.
See, I get a feeling like someone is watching me through a window. And I think it's this male, the elderly man.
It was only after his complete investigation that Peter was allowed to meet Joanne Rivera.
Nice to meet you.
Again? So far, I find that there's at least 4, maybe 6 entities, ghosts here. Was the name Wood have any spirit?
Wood, that's
Wood?
the Jolene Woods.
That's the name?
Yes. When Peter said the word wood, it was a very good feeling. It's nice to know that Jolene is here and that other people can sense her and feel her presence here too.
But I also get a sense like I'm being watched through a window. What about an older gentleman?
Peter noticed that there was a man that used to stare in the bedroom. There's 2 men upstairs, I think. One is the old man that looks through the windows that my daughter experienced, and also the man that comes into my bedroom and would stand at the foot of the bed.
Joanne took the psychic impressions in stride until Peter led her back to the south wing.
This hallway is very active.
I really hate this hallway.
He was drawn across the room, to a door, to a closet, to an event that chilled Joanne to the bone.
Was there a death here less than 20 years ago?
Yes. When Peter talked about the closet that I really don't like to go into and feel very uncomfortable about, he acknowledged that there was a lot of energy there. I don't like the closet.
But it's active. It's very active. Now, did anyone ever tell you, I'm receiving it vibrationally, is there some kind of a treasure here?
There's supposed to be. I haven't found it.
There is a very aggressive spirit there, and I think he's trying. I think there are 2 that are still battling over a buried treasure.
Joanne first heard about the treasure from Kathleen Bittner Roth, a psychic whom Peter James has never met. She sensed a treasure trove here, and without knowing it, Peter confirmed her psychic vision.
There was something in that closet that they were after. I believe that he may have come home unexpectedly. I have a sense that there were 2 men that were involved with whatever was in that closet.
I think the treasure is in the south wing of the house somewhere. And I think the ghost that's back there is trying to keep Joanne from finding this buried treasure. Pay attention. Now, there is a message that happens in this house at least once a week. And if you pay attention to the time you hear the piano play, the time of day, there's a key to where this thing is buried, this treasure is buried. I get a number 7.
Peter gave me hints on how to find the treasure, how to listen to the spirits that they're trying to tell me. They're trying to guide me. I think the spirits are trying to communicate with me, especially one in particular. I think that he wants me to resolve Park's death.
I think Parks is the one that is trying to communicate with her. I think he's the one that she finds in her bedroom. I think he's telling her, number 1, that he was murdered and that it wasn't suicide. The lady that is roaming through the house, I do believe, is Jolene Woods. She's also, I don't want to say that she's protective of Joanne, but I think she's more of a mediator, meaning that she's trying to keep peace between the 2 gentlemen that are battling.
I'm going to deal with the spirits, one in particular in the south wing, a little more strongly. I'm not going to be as frightened of him. The spirit that's there is welcome to stay there, but he can't always be chasing me up the hallway and making me feel afraid in my home.
She needs to just take charge of her home and tell him to leave.
My future here with the spirits that are here, I think that there are still questions. I think that they still have things to tell me. And hopefully now they'll be a little more open about communicating with me more directly. And I hope to find the treasure. And I think that when I find that treasure, that will open the door to Park's death. I think that has the answer.
The Rivera family has taken Peter James's advice to heart. They're trying to reach out to the spirits in their home. And they're listening for clues from the other side that will lead them to the treasure that Peter believes is buried close by.
Next, Nazi flying saucers. Mysterious remains of an ancient civilization. Later, after 20 years, a couple relives a frightening alien encounter.
Here are some of the stories making news at Sightings. After we aired a report about the existence of real-life flying saucers, Sightings received a fascinating letter from D. Robin Stowell of Milton Keynes, England. Mr. Stowell was alerting us to a startling footnote in an out-of-print book. Milton Keynes, England. It's not the kind of place where we expect to get new information on real-life flying saucers. But after our recent report on disc-shaped aircraft in Canada, top-secret American saucer projects, and Germany's development of craft like this during World War II, a Sightings researcher received this letter from viewer D. Robin Stowell. A typesetter by trade, Stowell alerted us to this book, Brighter Than 1,000 Suns, an authoritative history of the race to build the first atomic bomb. Stowell typeset the original manuscript nearly 40 years ago and never forgot this brief reference to a Nazi saucer that could outmaneuver any Allied aircraft. 4 decades after publication, Stowell found a copy of the out-of-print reference book and confirmed what he had long remembered. The footnote describes German saucers that were 45 yards across, capable of reaching speeds over Mach 1 and climbing to an elevation of nearly 8 miles. Some experts believe that these Nazi saucers could have been responsible for the legendary Foo Fighters sightings over Europe late in World War II. But if they were, it still does not explain Foo Fighters spotted over the Pacific during the same period. Near Lake Taupo, New Zealand, ancient stone blocks known as the Kaimanawa Wall have long been dismissed as insignificant by mainstream archaeology. But a second look now could rewrite history.
The blocks of stone that are in the Kaimanawa Wall are huge, 20 feet by 6 feet in some cases. They must weigh many tons. In order to have stacked and placed these blocks would have required a pretty high technology.
Nicknamed the dinosaur's barbecue, the wall doesn't go back that far, but non-native animal bones found nearby do date back to 100 BC. Childress believes that humans may have brought these animals here, and the timeline established by traditional anthropology is wrong.
Right now, the official history is that no person came to New Zealand before 700 years ago. We know that the wall needs to be at least 2,000 years old because it is covered by the volcanic ash of a known eruption, the eruption of Lake Taupo, approximately 2,000 years ago.
Ancient ash and dense forest hide the wall's most astonishing feature. The blocks form a pyramid shape, a design found nowhere else in this part of the world.
Discoveries all over the world are showing that man has been around and traveling and building giant ruins much earlier than originally presumed.
Childress is supported by some Maoris, the indigenous people of New Zealand, who believe that their ancestors came here 2,000 years ago. But Maori support is a double-edged sword. If the legends are true, this is a sacred site and must not be excavated. We'll have more stories in the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up as Sightings continues.
They both saw the mysterious object in the sky. What they never remembered was the missing time, until now.
I felt sick. I literally felt nauseated at the thought of it.
Karen Klinger has never forgotten a bizarre experience that happened during a moonlit walk more than 20 years ago. First, time suddenly slipped away in the blink of an eye. Then, there were 3 bright orange lights in the sky. Was it a trick? A hallucination? Well, the questions went unanswered until Karen saw a recent Sightings report on alien abduction, and something about the story struck a resonant chord. Memories of that moonlit night in 1975 were incomplete, but strangely compelling. An engaged couple on a family vacation steal away for a quiet drive through the north woods of Wisconsin. There's something strange about that ride that they can't figure out yet. Back at the cabin, the couple stroll down to the lake. The night is clear, there's a bright star, but then it moves and they realize this is no star.
There was one star-like object. It was a little bit brighter than a star, kind of an orangey color that seemed to stand out from the others a bit. Really didn't think anything of it at the time, but my focus kept going back and forth to that particular object. And after a while, I noticed some odd things about it.
This bright orange star that was along the horizon of the trees on the other side of the lake zipped right to the top of our heads, and we looked up.
The stargazing couple were Karen Klinger and Dennis Morowska, and what they saw would haunt them for more than 20 years.
I think the best way I could describe the flight is like that of a dragonfly. It was just, it would zip here, stop, zip here, stop, zip, 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 zip really fast. And like, what are we watching? You know, I was fascinated by it. I didn't want to stop looking at it. I was just glued to it. And we finally started calling my folks down from the cabin so they could watch. And my mother was a little scared.
The whole family got down to the lake in time to see the single light split into three, then rejoin as one. It was a fascinating spectacle that drove one family member to try something illogical.
Denny's sister's boyfriend went into the house and got a large beam flashlight and flashed at the UFOs 3 times. Suddenly, they just completely disappeared. And about maybe a couple of seconds later, they flashed back at us the same amount of times as we had flashed at it.
After a few minutes of this strange communication, everyone reached the same impossible conclusion.
By this time, we knew we were watching something that we had no explanation for. It was really strange and definitely appeared to be intelligently controlled.
The bizarre communication went on for half an hour. Then, in less than the blink of an eye, the UFO was gone. The encounter had a profound effect, but Karen and Dennis wouldn't know just how profound for another 2 decades. By then, they had married, had a son, and an acrimonious divorce. In fact, in 1994, they were barely speaking when Dennis and Karen met to exchange custody of their son.
Well, this particular evening, he got out of the car probably for the first time that he'd talked to me face-to-face in a year. And he knocks on the window of the car. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth was, "Have you ever considered hypnosis?" And I said to him, I said, "You saw that program."
The program was Sightings, and our report on the abduction experience of 4 men camping in the Allagash wilderness of northern Maine. They too had seen a UFO in the sky. Like Karen and Dennis, they had used a flashlight to signal the spacecraft. And most importantly of all, the Allagash 4 had missing time. A roaring fire they had left just minutes before was now nearly out. Karen and Dennis, divorced and barely speaking, watched the report in different homes, but had the same revelation at the same moment. They too had had missing time.
Both Karen and I remembered the night of this incident that as we were driving around the lake, which is exactly a 4-mile radius, doesn't take very long to cover it all, that at one point we looked up and the moon was directly in line with the rearview mirror of the car. And by the time we got back to the lake, which shouldn't have been very long, the moon was setting.
It never occurred to me until that moment that there could possibly be some missing time involved. I felt sick. I literally felt nauseated at the thought of it.
But what happened during that missing time? Dennis asked Karen if she would consider hypnotherapy as a way to find the answer.
I think the nature of a repressed memory is that there is no conscious access to this memory. It's not something that somebody remembers once or occasionally and then sticks back in a locked vault someplace in their mind.
Dr. David Clayton agreed to hypnotize Karen. He had no faith in the abduction experience, but as he worked with Karen, he realized that she was not unlike other patients who he'd seen relive past trauma under hypnosis.
Karen was recalling a very intense white light that approached the vehicle that she and her former husband were in at the time. And when this white light approached the side of the vehicle, it was so intense, I think Karen, at that point, felt that she had fainted.
Under Dr. Clayton's watchful eye, Karen revealed traumatic contact with extraterrestrial beings, something Dennis couldn't or wouldn't recall. But their descriptions of the craft were nearly identical.
We compared notes later. They corroborated very closely with some of the points that Karen had brought up under hers. We both got these images of a grid-like pattern, almost a primitive type structure, almost like a dirigible or something.
Independently, Karen and Dennis insisted that the purpose of the abduction was not to hurt them, but to help all humankind. They each felt compelled to deliver the same message. The fate of Earth is intertwined with alien worlds throughout the cosmos, and Earthlings are not doing a good job of taking care of our part of the universe. It's a message that abduction support group leader Mary Kerfoot hears a lot.
As far as the phenomenon in general, some people's experiences can truly be described as abductions. They are taken kicking and screaming, struggling against their will. Others evolve over time as they understand what is happening to come very cooperatively and become associated with the beings that they're working with in a participatory role.
The Chicago Center for Encounters support group was formed in 1993, so abductees and experiencers would know that they are not alone.
It's enormously exciting for the members of our support group to compare experiences, because as soon as you find someone who has some aspect that is similar or exactly like yours, you feel much more validated.
At first, abductees were pariahs, oddballs, inventing a new mythology. But after 3 decades, the phenomenon is not going away because, abductees insist, alien contact is a reality.
If you feel that this has happened to you, by all means, do whatever it takes to uncover the information, because it's worth the risk.
Just as she was reassured after watching our Allagash abduction report, Karen Klinger hopes that her personal story will encourage more people to come forward, or at least to seek help from a certified professional hypnotherapist, or from one of the hundreds of support groups forming around the world.
Next,
I personally don't believe that plants have a nervous system.
the changing beliefs about plant consciousness.
They communicate through images.
In the short story, The Sound Machine, author Roald Dahl weaves a tale about a man who invents a listening device so sensitive he hears a rose cry out as it's cut for a bouquet, and he hears a tree scream in agony at the first blow from an axe. It's an imaginative story written in the late 40s. And in the late 90s, as it turns out, The Sound Machine isn't just science fiction anymore. From the Amazon rainforest teeming with life, to the old-growth redwoods of America, to the humblest vegetable garden, Earth is sustained by plant life. They give us food, shelter, and the very air we breathe. Plants live so we may live, but there is evidence that they have a secret life of their own.
I think that fundamentally, anything that we see in nature has a life force and energy.
Frank Lapina is a Wintun tribal elder and a professor of art and ethnic studies. He has studied traditional beliefs about the symbiotic relationship between people and plants.
All plants have a purpose. They have a consciousness.
It is called animism, the foundation of many ancient belief systems. Plants carry an eternal life force, a soul that transcends their lifespan. Some modern researchers have attempted to prove this scientifically, but mainstream botanists scoff at even the suggestion that plants have a consciousness.
I personally don't believe that plants have a nervous system. I don't believe that they have feelings.
Dr. Jim Lovelace, a botanist at Humboldt State University in California, wasn't always so sure. 23 years ago, he was inspired by the work of Cleve Baxter and a groundbreaking book called The Secret Life of Plants. He tried to find a soul in the greenhouse and couldn't.
We set up the polygraph and we had experiments on this for 2 years. We, in all of that time, did not get a single response that we could attribute to the communication of plants.
Michael Thoreau, director of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, says he is having better luck. For the past 2 years, Thoreau and his colleagues have designed new machines that do seem to measure some kind of plant communication.
Based on our research, plants, once they hear the sounds of another plant, they start to what appears to be a dialogue between each other.
Thoreau believes that he has devised a way for humans to listen in on what the plants are saying. Using a novel system he calls the poor man's polygraph, Thoreau is translating the inaudible pulses of plant language into something humans can hear, but not yet understand.
We have the plant hooked up to some tiny electrodes, which goes into a biosensing unit, and through this audio board, we can adjust the tone so that we can actually hear what's going on with the plant.
According to Thoreau, what sounds like noise to us now is a plant language scientists must learn to translate.
Orthodox science might have a problem with the fact that plants respond.
I believe that the results that he is getting can be attributed to damage to the cells themselves, the flow of ions out of the cells, and with the proper sensors, perhaps he is detecting that. I don't believe it's the plant talking.
But Thoreau's early findings support what Professor and Tribal Elder Lapina says Native Americans have known all along.
What scientists have done by making experiments is reinforce the idea that we are dealing with a life force. We already know they're alive. Now let's see how that relates to the kind of responses that they're getting, and then have a cross-species communication process beginning to be developed. It's a linguistic problem.
Michael Thoreau is already trying to bridge this linguistic gap. The Research Center has developed a way to convert plant noise into a visual image. The picture of plant thought is called a biogram.
Plants communicate via what we would call eidetic imagery. They communicate strictly through images, pure images. I believe the more sensitive the plant is, the more interesting the pictures become.
If it is such an obvious phenomenon, why isn't it generalized throughout the scientific community? I mean, all a plant is a whole bundle of adaptations to environmental conditions that exist now or did exist in the past. That's why the plant's here.
You have a philosophical gap in what the world is about and what its purpose and meaning can be. Because we would say not only plants, but the earth, stones are also alive. The water is alive.
The debate will only be over, Thoreau says, when someone can finally prove that plants are more than chlorophyll factories. Once that is accomplished, we will hear an earth-shattering message.
Life is valuable in whatever form or shape that it is.
Plants are only the first step for Michael Thoreau. His ultimate goal is to use his sensors on people to listen for subtle signs of illness. Thoreau hopes that one day doctors will be able to give very early diagnoses and save many more lives.
In 1995, they came in force. Now, have UFOs returned to South Korea?
If Earth is being visited, they're speeding up the process.
When a fascinating string of unidentified flying objects appeared in the sky over South Korea, Sightings was the first to report on the UFO's connection to other strange craft spotted in Mexico and the United States. Well, now, almost a year to the day later, a new UFO over South Korea has been caught on tape. It was a little over a year ago when this astonishing amateur video captured a UFO being sighted all over Seoul, South Korea. The craft was either breaking apart or replicating itself, a rare phenomenon known to ufologists as a cluster UFO.
Right now, each ball seems to be about 100 feet in diameter and 10,000 feet in the air, moving at 700, 800, 900 miles an hour. We think it's probably not a weather balloon that's become untethered. We think it is probably not a military project.
Computer analysis seemed to indicate that this was the brainchild of advanced technology, not a freak of nature. It was only the third time in history that a cluster UFO could be analyzed. Sightings found rare tape of a cluster over Utah in 1952 and over Mexico City in 1992. Ufologists Lee and Britt Elders began studying the clusters after they witnessed the Mexico City UFO.
We've seen this before. This is not new to us. In October of 1992, we saw our first cluster.
Almost a year to the day after Sightings' initial report, we received a new video and a warning that Korea was on edge. Many citizens are reporting in with sightings of a new, unidentified craft, and the general consensus is that this is the beginning of a new flap. The latest videotape shows a UFO very different from the cluster of last year. It streaks above Seoul, flying perilously close to the city skyline. While the original Korean cluster UFO is generally recognized by ufologists as a true unknown, the new UFO has met with much skepticism, even within the UFO community. Sightings obtained the new video for an exclusive U.S. analysis. Jeff Sainyo is chief video analyst for MUFON, the world's largest UFO research group. He looks at thousands of supposed UFO photographs and videotapes every year.
Typically, a majority of both photos and videos I get are of ordinary objects from sincere people. So in analyzing it, the first thing to do is eliminate ordinary objects as possibilities.
Sainyo spent more than 3 days examining the new Korean UFO.
What we see in this footage from Korea is a very distant shot. You do have a reference object in there. It's a cable hanging off of a construction crane, fairly out of focus. And also you can see the UFO here, so you can assume that it's also out of focus. Fairly hard to make out there. And as we roll this, you can make out a contrail shape there. And if you watch here, you can see a fairly well-defined head on it. You can see right here it's moved a little bit further out, typical of an airplane. Straight, ordinary motion. And about right here, you can see a little glint of light. It's probably a reflection of the sun off of a window. So you see really no anomalous motion. This is a good example of how you can see a well-intentioned person here with a very high zoom camera, unable to see it by eye, is mistaking an ordinary object for something unusual.
Despite MUFON's official dismissal of the videotape, thousands of Koreans remain unconvinced. They see the UFO as an omen, a new generation of UFOs that will follow in the footsteps of last year's spectacular cluster. There will be more, Korean ufologists are saying, and contact is inevitable.
If Earth is being visited by people from other places, from other worlds, from other dimensions, they're speeding up the process right now. Something major is happening.
Why Korea? And why now? Veteran ufologists suggest that the answer can be found by studying the past. In an unusual number of reported flaps, major UFO events are followed by a period of momentous geological or political change in the same area. That is why some people in South Korea believe that their UFOs portend peace with North Korea.
Sightings, UFOs, a new book from author Susan Michaels, drawn from the files of Sightings. Sightings, UFOs is a comprehensive survey of compelling UFO encounters. Was Washington, D.C. the object of extraterrestrial surveillance in 1952? Have our nuclear facilities been invaded by silent intruders? What really happens at 39,000 feet? Commercial pilots speak out. These are only a few of the stories contained in Sightings, UFOs from Fireside Books.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
I got 2 more bogeys coming in hot.
Let's make them bleed.
Matthew Lillard, Freddie Prinze Jr.,
I love this baby.
Wing Commander, Thursday at 9 on Sci-Fi.
What are they supposed to look like?
You mean who are they supposed to look like? Peter Weller, Screamers, Sunday at 9 on Sci-Fi.